Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Now, 7 Labour MPs have resigned from the party, protesting Jeremy Corbyn's approach to Brexit and anti-Semitism. They've often been among the loudest critics of the Labour leader and will now sit in the Commons as independents. One of the MPs, Luciana Berger, says she's embarrassed and ashamed to stay in the party. Mr Corbyn says he's disappointed by their decision, while the Shadow Chancellor is calling on them to stand down and face by-elections. Our political editor Laura Koonsberger report contains some flashing images.
After a frenzy of rumours making their way into a stifling, cramped London room. Labour MPs when they woke up this morning, but after months of struggle to make their presence felt, at 10 a.m. they sent emails to say they were Labour MPs no more. Whether because of anti-Semitism.
The leadership has willfully and repeatedly failed to address hatred against Jewish people within its ranks. I am leaving behind a culture of bullying, bigotry and intimidation.
Or ideas. A profound clash of ideas between this group and Jeremy Corbyn over another EU referendum.
This has not been an easy decision for any of us. The evidence of Labour's betrayal on Europe is now visible for all to see. Offering to actually enable this government's Brexit, constantly holding back from allowing the public a final say.
Maybe they believe Brexit's broken our politics altogether, reckoning time for something new.
It is time we dumped this country's old-fashioned politics and created an alternative. You don't join a political party to spend years and years fighting the people within it. You get involved in politics, you join a party to change the world. So we invite you to leave your parties and help us forge a new consensus on a way forward for Britain.
Many of your colleagues in the Labour Party are going to feel that you have let them down. Some of them may even feel that you are betraying them by leaving, where you should be sticking together. What do you say to your colleagues and to members of the Labour Party who feel that way?
This is a Labour Party which has changed beyond recognition, and you have to make a decision. It's not just the politics, it is whether you can feel a moral integrity to go along with things that you can no longer justify or accept. And I've come to my own breaking point. I cannot do that any longer.
Do you accept that by leaving, because of the way our political system works, that makes a Tory government more likely at the next election?
People feel politically homeless, and they are asking and begging for an alternative.
It seemed none of them knew quite what to say at the end. Not yet a political party with a leader or a manifesto. Their long-held private fears now very public. But how many others might follow them and leave him?
Good morning, how nice to see you all here this morning. Good morning, how nice to see you, and goodbye.
No party wants to say farewell to some of its support.
I'm disappointed, but all of these MPs stood on our manifesto in 2017, Jeremy Corbyn's manifesto. They all increased their majorities. Now they're on a different platform. So the honourable thing, the usual thing for them to do now is to stand down and fight by-elections.
Backbench unhappiness at Jeremy Corbyn isn't new, but he's had powerful supporters from the very start.
There's a strong whiff of hypocrisy here. They stood as Labour MPs on a platform in the general election 18 months ago. All of them got massive increases in their majorities. I have to tell them it wasn't because of their own personal charisma.
But the cameras and the crush are because there are others who believe the system can't be repaired, maybe even including a sprinkling of Tories too.
This isn't just about Brexit. This group that's causing such a frenzy already believe our whole political system is broken. But whether this tiny number can grow to something with a real impact, something only weeks and months will tell.
They know, though, this may be their biggest moment, a flash that fades. Their hope, though, is to persuade their old colleagues and you that a few could become the many.
And that is the big question, isn't it, Laura? Is this just the start? Could there be more leaving the party, do you think?
Well, this group certainly isn't short of ambition, but right now they don't have numbers that add up to very much. However, behind the scenes, it's clear that there are a number of Labour MPs who are thinking about this, who are thinking very seriously about it, but they are miles off becoming inevitably some big political fighting force. But with Brexit crisscrossing party lines and causing such turmoil here at Westminster, turning everything upside down, it's also not impossible that a sprinkling of Conservative MPs might also end up leaving their party and joining this group. But so far, at this stage, even though we are not far off the final Brexit showdown in Parliament, it seems that this group is likely, at least in the next few weeks and months, to stay relatively small. But remember, Theresa May has a minority government, and that means even relatively small groups of MPs could make a difference to the alchemy of how things work out in these vital months. And in terms of the Labour Party itself, it's no surprise that many backbenchers, we know they've had concerns about Jeremy Corbyn's leadership for a long time, just as well as he has very enthusiastic support from many, many members out there around the country. But it's clear those concerns really are shared by many here in Westminster. Even the deputy leader of the party tonight, Tom Watson, who himself is elected by party members, warned that unless the party changes, well, more could follow these MPs out of the door. And in very serious terms, he even said he does not always recognise the party that he loves.
OK, Laura, thank you. Laura Koonsberg there, our political editor at Westminster.
Not for almost 40 years has there been such a split in British politics as 7 Labour MPs walked out of the party they once loved over Jeremy Corbyn, Brexit, anti-Semitism and what they call the machine politics of the hard left. So can a new political movement fly? Who would vote for it? Our political editor, Gary Gibbon, is with me now. Well, quite a day.
Quite a day, and it's ended in an extraordinary way with a meeting of the Parliamentary Labour Party tonight, at which, when John Cryer, the chairman of the PLP, got up and started talking about the 7 MPs who've now left the Labour Party, there was applause from the room, quite a lot of it. And that applause wasn't necessarily signalling that they're about to join the gang of 7, but it was signalling enormous discontent with Jeremy Corbyn and his leadership and the way it has responded to all of this.
They were applauding the 7.
They were applauding the 7 in there. And there were emotional moments in there when one Labour MP, Ruth Smith, got up and talked about the disappointment of losing old friends, and she got quite emotional. People who were in there, eyewitnesses, said that she seemed to be in tears. The whole mood in the room was, I think, quite a surprise to some people who went into there. I think one of the other surprises, perhaps to some people, but not if you know some of the mechanics that have been worked on this whole project, is how you haven't heard at all from the big beasts of Labour. An awful lot of attempts have been made to call up some of the big beasts of the past, the years in government, and none of them are chipping in at the moment, and that's because they've been told to button it and not necessarily spoil a project that's meant to look like new politics.
Right, but I mean, you know, are there more in the pipeline? I mean, really intriguing video message from Tom Watson, the deputy leader.
Yes, talking to backbenchers generally during the day, you got an extraordinary amount of what you got in the meeting of MPs tonight, a lot of them having real sympathy for these 7. And Tom Watson, deputy leader, put out his own online statement in which he said to the leadership, you've got to change course, or there will be quite a few more of these. I should just say, very quick, in parenthesis as it were, we mustn't lose sight of the Conservatives in all of this. They're hoping to get some Conservative people joining their gang, the 7, and today, this afternoon, the Prime Minister has had 4 cabinet ministers walk into her office, followed by 5 ministers, all of them saying to her, and some of them representing an even bigger alliance of ministers, that she's got to push back the date of Brexit. So real tensions there that could play into the fortunes of the group of 7 in, as you say, another extraordinary day in Westminster.
It was only a couple of minutes after they'd pressed send on an email to the Labour Party, resigning their memberships. No wonder one of the former Labour MPs hadn't quite adjusted.
My name is Luciana Berger, and I am the Labour and... I am the Member of Parliament for Liverpool Wavertree. This morning, we have all now resigned from the Labour Party. This has been a very difficult, painful, but necessary decision.
For now, this is not a new political party with a logo and party colours. Its leading figures coyly suggested that's where they hope the story ends.
So we invite you to leave your parties and help us forge a new consensus on a way forward for Britain. If you're sick and tired of politics as usual, well, guess what? So are we.
Of course, we're hoping to recruit people from other parties, because one of the things I particularly feel strongly about is you will see over Brexit that the party system has actually broken down.
The MPs said Jeremy Corbyn led a party that had become sickeningly institutionally racist, with a culture of bullying, bigotry and intimidation.
And goodbye.
The leadership said the 7 MPs must now resign their seats and stand in by-elections to test their mandates.
The honourable thing, the usual thing for them to do now, is to stand down and fight by-elections back in their constituencies.
So they would be dishonourable if they didn't do that?
I think it's the usual and honourable thing to do.
Leadership allies gnashed their teeth. Young Labour tweeted, "Cowards flinch and traitors sneer." Squawk Box, a pro-Corbyn news site, said the 7 MPs showed vacuity and hypocrisy.
They were both within and beyond our
Jeremy Corbyn's deputy struck a very different note, suggesting in an online message the leadership response was completely inadequate.
I confess I feared this day would come, and I fear now that unless we change, we may see more days like this. The departure of our colleague poses a test for our party. Do we respond with simple condemnation, or do we try and reach out beyond our comfort zone and prevent others from following?
When we've got our Deputy Leader Tom Watson saying today that he now no longer recognises the Labour Party sometimes, then it shows that what the people who've left today have said, that some of those criticisms are much more widely shared than just among 7 people.
And I can tell you from the people that I speak to in my own constituency, they're desperate to find a home for their politics.
Why weren't you on that stage today? You sound like you're 1 foot there.
Well, I think it's important for the Labour Party to be able to have the opportunity to change their ways and to do what they think is right for the country. The challenge has been laid down.
How long's he got, Jeremy Corbyn, to change his ways?
Well, we've got 27th of February meaningful votes next week. We come out of the European Union in less than 1,000 hours. I think it's now time for the leader of the Labour Party to pivot to the conference motion, which was unanimously passed, which is a people's vote with the option to remain. He must do that, and he must do it soon.
And if he doesn't, there'll be a whole load of people following the ones today.
Well, it certainly would probably be more likely, wouldn't it?
Signs of more Labour MPs waiting in the wings, but not yet of Tories.
Why aren't you launching a centre party today? Is it because you haven't had any Tories turn up yet?
I think that what we want to do is sit as a group of independent MPs and make the appeal to the people, as Chuka did earlier, to give people out there the chance to tell us what they want to see in a new, sensible, centre-ground political movement.
Nearly 4 decades after another set of Labour figures posed in London's East End to start their journey out of the Labour Party and into the SDP, there were echoes and warnings from history.
Limehouse Declaration marks a liberation for millions of voters in this country, disenfranchised in the past.
As someone who was in the SDP, what do you think is the lesson learnt from that?
Well, I think there are a lot of lessons, but one of them is that if the break is simply a split in the Labour Party, that's important, but that doesn't create a new politics with the common values amongst liberal, outward-looking people. Which
you need some Tories and you need others.
I think there has to be. I'm sure there will be a split in the Tory party in due course, because you've got people cohabiting who have nothing in common. But that's something we need to see.
The Gang of 7 are not household names like some in the Gang of 4 in the 1980s. They'll be hoping the turmoil of Brexit might make party structures more fragile than they proved to be decades ago.
Well, with me now are 2 of the breakaway MPs, Luciana Berger and Chuka Umunna. So we know what you're against, but what are you for? What would you do that a Labour government wouldn't?
Well, we've been very clear today. We've set out the values that bind us together as a group of 7, that are the values that led many of us to join the Labour Party in the first place, and it's clear that the party no longer espouses. I've set out those values
like
today: equality for all, opportunity for all, anti-racism, against all, social justice, and we see...
I mean, Labour would say, of course, those are Labour ideals. You would have said that a week ago.
Well, it's very, very clear, as we've set out on very many fronts, where the party has departed from that, where we're seeing across all parties a gravity towards the extremes, towards the fringes, which don't no longer reflect what the wishes of my own constituents and the wishes of the country.
Chukramana, do you have a second tranche? Is there another group lined up? Do you have any Tories lined up?
Well, it's not about lining up any group of people. This has been a very, very difficult decision for us. It's been made by reference to our values, which are shaped by who we are, where we're from. There are clearly a large number of discontented people, both in our old party, the Labour Party, and the Conservative Party.
Did you know they'd applauded you in the PLP just now?
Well, I have to say, I mean, we were quite surprised by that because, of course, you know, for tribal reasons, of course, people will take against some of the things that we, you know, have said today. But, I mean, look, you asked what are the differences? I would say there are three big policy areas that have partly driven the decision. One is Brexit. You know, we are overwhelmingly anti-Brexit.
So you are an anti-Brexit party or grouping?
We think this is a disaster, and we wanted a much stronger, coherent opposition to the Conservative Party's Brexit. So that was number one. I think number two is the overall foreign policy position. We saw it on Scripple, we see it in relation to the lukewarm attitude of the leadership to NATO. And then thirdly, more broadly, making promises that can't necessarily be delivered. But the big thing, aside from the policies, was the culture.
What do you mean promises that can't be delivered, that first?
Well, making large promises that you can't necessarily on various different things. But above all, look, we didn't join a political party to be abused, to have to spend hours and days organising against other party members. You join a political party to change the world. And the problem was that so much of the rancour was becoming a distraction, and that's why we've chosen to go independent.
I mean, 7 MPs can't change the world, can they? I mean, we have an electoral system that is stacked against you if you do become a new political party, which I assume you will.
Well, we have to stand up for what we believe in, and we've taken what has been a very painful decision, but to make that step today. You've reflected on what's happened in the Parliamentary Labour Party. I know from the very many messages, private messages of support that I've received.
So there
from
are
colleagues.
more.
Well, there's certainly
Chuka didn't
colleagues.
answer that question. Are there more of you?
We can't speak on behalf of those colleagues. Everyone has to arrive at a decision in their own time when they see fit. It's clear that there's a lot of discontent that is reflected in the reports that we've heard back from the PLP this evening. We've taken that stand. It's for others to make the decision to do so in their own time.
Who's behind you? Who's backing you? Who's funding you?
We are nothing. We're not a party.
Well, you've got a website. I mean, somebody must be putting some money into something.
We've financially backed ourselves.
Have you got any financial backers?
Well, we've actually been moved by the fact that, as I understand it today, we've had hundreds of people very, very kindly make donations on our website today.
Well, you know, the suspicion is that there are a load of old New Labour, Blairite businessmen who are funding their own centre party.
It's day one. This is day one. We're not a party. So first of all, we're not a party. Second of all, we reach out to the country to say if you want to get involved, please do join us. There's a website. We are the independent.group. We've been buoyed by as I understand it, and I can only reflect on my inbox, the thousands of messages that we have received today. I was even an MP, and neither was Tricker when the times that you refer to. We are of a different generation. We're in 2019. The country faces very, very significant challenges at this moment. And it is on that basis that we've made the decision that we have today. And we invite people to join us in the country, and we invite people within the Houses of Commons behind us to join us too.
The thing is, Christian, we've got this place, right, is operating like it's the 20th century. And we actually need to update our politics so it's fit for the 21st century. And the problem is, if you look at the established parties, they're not fit for purpose. They are unstable coalitions which have fractured. They're not doing their job competently. And a lot of people out there are simply voting for parties to stop the other lot getting in, or because they see it as the least worst option. And we're saying, look, surely we can do better than this in this country.
But isn't this 20th century politics? This is the SDP all over again, in that you will split the progressive vote in marginal seats and let Tory MPs win.
No, look, this is a totally different century.
Will you stand a candidate against Amber Rudd?
Well, let's see. We're not a party.
If you have a backer there.
We will all make decisions at the appropriate moment when there is a general election. The decision we've taken today is to leave the Labour Party. That is the first step. We've become an independent group of MPs. We are not a party at this moment in time, but we want to listen to the country, to hear what they've got to say in response. And it's clear from just in the past few hours that we've had a very significant response.
What is the difference between a group and a party?
Well, it's the first stage, isn't it? So
because you're just seven people.
But look, the traditional way things are done here, right? Someone gets up a podium in committee room and tells everyone how it's going to be. We're clear that we think there needs to be an alternative. People need a better choice than they've got at the moment. But everybody's got to be involved in that conversation. So, look, I'm not going to deny. You know, some people might say, yes, have a new party. That might be the best way.
Will you have one leader?
We are a totally flat structure. We're going to we're looking forward to our inaugural meeting.
We did say we're going to do things differently.
Yeah, but Chris, you are presenting the questions.
I know they're 20th century questions, aren't they?
You're presenting it in the context.
7 leaders, maybe.
No, in the context of the status quo. And we've taken the decision today that the status quo isn't good enough.
But you've got to work in the system we have.
But we've said it's not good enough. And actually, our constituents deserve better than this, and the country deserves better than this. And we want to stand up, and we've come together to work constructively in the national interest, because we could just put our heads in the sand, pretend like that there isn't a problem, and just continue, as things are. But we don't think that's right. And we put ourselves forward for public office, and with that comes responsibility. And that's why I've certainly made that decision today.
Well, it's the beginning of a long conversation and several interviews, I think. But Luciana Berger, Chukwuemeka, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Indeed. Well, with me now is the Labour frontbencher, Richard Burgos.
Hi, Christian.
It's a disaster for you, isn't it?
Well, it's a sad day. I'm sorry to see these colleagues leave the Labour Party. I think it's a mistake, and it's nothing that should be celebrated at all.
Well, it's been celebrated by your own members of the Parliamentary Labour Party, apparently. They were applauding the 7 who left.
Well, I don't think they should be applauding people for leaving. They weren't.
Well, they did.
They weren't applauding the people who left. Obviously,
who were they applauding?
For example, Luciana has done great work as a Labour MP in putting forward the case for better mental health provision, including in prisons, which is of great interest to me as the Shadow Secretary of State for Justice. But actually, when I watched the press conference today, it didn't seem to me, when you look at the coalition that Chuka's trying to assemble with Liberal Democrats and Conservatives, it didn't really feel like new, refreshing politics. And I just urge everyone to think, whatever you do, don't do anything which makes it more likely that a Conservative government stays in power. Because at my advice sessions at weekends, as people coming to me about universal credit, about the bedroom tax, people going to food banks, and anything, and history shows us any split only makes the Conservatives staying in power more likely.
Your Deputy Leader Tom Watson said he saw this coming. Did you?
Well, it didn't surprise me because it's been trailed for a long time.
But he saw it coming because of the behaviour in the Labour Party. He says the Labour Party is sometimes a place he doesn't recognise. Is that the same for you?
I think that there has been unacceptable behaviour by a minority of Labour Party members. Of course, we must make mention of the issue of anti-Semitism. One anti-Semite in the Labour Party is more than there should be, and robust, ruthless action is required.
So are you going to change?
Well, I think
that's what Tom Watson was saying today, wasn't he? That unless the leadership changes, there will be more days like this and more Labour MPs will go.
What I would say, the kind of change that was being talked about in the press conference today by this new organisation that Chuka's put together, if we're talking about a new foreign policy, because that was mentioned...
No, I'm talking about changing the Labour Party.
Oh,
That's what Tom Watson was talking about.
Of course.
Is the leadership going to change its style in order to stop more MPs leaving?
But of course, in the press conference today, it was set out the things they think the Labour Party needs to change. Mike Gape said the Labour Party needs to change its foreign policy. He still celebrates the Iraq War. He still cozies up, unfortunately, to the Saudi Arabian royal family with all their human rights abuses. Chris Leslie is still deeply uncomfortable with Labour being an anti-austerity party. So whilst change is already needed, I don't think that kind of change will either be popular with the people out there.
So you think they're a bunch of old Blairites?
I think that's an oversimplification, but much of what's being said...
You're the one who's talking about, Blairite policies.
I think the political record of Angela and of Chris Leslie and of Mike speaks for itself. But what I would say to them is the door's always open. I think it's a real mistake that they've made today. And I think
the door is open and more Labour MPs are going to walk out. That's the risk, isn't it?
I think people need to bear in mind the fact that they were elected as Labour candidates in the Labour manifesto. I'll be honest here, I'm under no illusion. In my constituency, most people voted for me, not because I'm Richard Bergen, but because I'm a Labour Party candidate. And what I do think is right is that they actually do the democratic thing. They actually have no mandate to stand or represent their constituents in this new organisation.
Did you go out saying that about Jared O'Mara?
I said it about a number
Did you
of
say
Labour
it about
colleagues.
him?
Well, I think he let down his constituents and his party members. And
Did you go out calling for him to call a by-election?
Well, I think there should be a by-election.
You're calling for it now, but that's several
I think I will have done. I mean, he did the wrong thing by his constituents. So whoever somebody is, whether they claim to be on the left or whether they have a different view in the Labour Party, it's the wrong thing to do. And when somebody changes political party, I do think they should put it back to their electorate.
You said today that they have possibly weakened the case for a second referendum. Just talk us through that. Are you saying Labour is less likely now to back a second referendum?
What I'm saying
because they will.
What I'm saying is that people out there who are all ears to the idea of the possibility of a second referendum might start to think that because sometimes the message is devalued by the messenger. I think when we've heard some of the things said today by some of the people...
So Labour is still going to back a second referendum?
Well, it's still an option on the table. And, for example, if it were a choice between a second referendum and a no-deal Brexit, then yes, we'd be backing a second referendum as a better alternative to disastrous no-deal Brexit.
So when would that come? When would that time come?
It may come in a very short amount of time, as you know.
On the 27th of February?
It could come very quickly.
OK, well, we'll see. Richard Burgon, thank you very much indeed. Well, welcome back to Westminster. Now, earlier we heard from one of the MPs in this new independent group, Luciana Berger, who's faced a torrent of online abuse and anti-Semitism, as well as attempted no-confidence motions from some activists in her local Labour Party in Liverpool, Wavertree, who just disagree with her politics. But what do her constituents make of her decision? Our North of England correspondent Claire Fallon has been to Wavertree to find out.
The tourists come here for the Beatles, but in 2010, Luciana Berger came here to be MP. Liverpool Wavertree is about as Labour as it gets, only now its MP isn't. Luciana Berger is your MP, yeah?
Yes, from Wavertree.
What do you think of her?
Exactly the same as everybody else thinks of their other MPs. What did he do for us?
In the Wellington, I met Michael. He follows politics, he's interested and engaged. But ask about the local MP quitting Labour, and his despair is obvious.
It just seems that they're all in the same sort of group, whether they're Labour, Conservative, Liberal Democrat, it doesn't matter. That's the way I feel. Completely and utterly confused.com.
When it comes to the next general election, if you've got Luciana Berger standing as an independent and there's a Labour candidate standing against her, would you vote for either of them?
I think everybody's going to vote for the Labour, because that's what everybody in Liverpool votes for, Labour.
Since 2010, Luciana Berger's majority has been growing, but not everyone in the local Labour parties is keen. There have been attempts to get her out. Lifelong Labour voter and Corbyn fan Tony fears MPs leaving will only help the other side.
We need to stop this austerity. People have had enough of austerity. They've had enough of all the cuts. This should happen with a socialist government. So I think the breakaway is wrong. You can't have a decent debate anymore.
Tony works alongside something of a rarity round these parts because Rob is a Tory voter in Liverpool. And yet these two work harmoniously together. You can't help think the politicians could learn a thing or two.
We need to work together and not just rant and rave at each other and listen to the salient points of the argument. That would do us all a lot more good than just using venom every time you meet somebody who doesn't have the same views as yourself. That's no good.
And that's kind of what Luciana Berger has been on the receiving end of. With, I mean, the level of abuse she's had is appalling.
Yes, and, you know, an MP's job cannot be easy, but when she has a cabal of party members clearly attacking her personally, that must be very difficult for her and her family.
Many here say they feel for their MP as a person. But for all those who've quit, the question is whether people will still vote for them.
Well, that's the view from one constituency. So who can this new group or party appeal to? What should it stand for? And will it just do like the SDP did and help open the door to another Conservative government? I'm joined now by Aisha Hazarika, a former advisor to Ed Miliband, who's now a comedian, the Times columnist and former Tony Blair advisor Philip Collins, who's been so keen on a new party that he's written a prospective manifesto for one, and Faiza Shaheen, a Jeremy Corbyn supporter and Labour parliamentary candidate standing against Ian Duncan-Smith. Aisha, I mean, do you think this is a group that can appeal to people electorally?
Well, I think they've got to be really clear strategically what their aim is. If their aim is to sort of shake up British politics and create this whole new sort of movement, I think we've got to see a bit more flesh on the bones. What are the actual policies that they're proposing? If their mission is to stop Jeremy Corbyn becoming Prime Minister, which is what I think their real mission is, I think they have to be clear about that. I think at the moment it feels like they're kind of being pulled in sort of two directions.
Phil Collins, I mean, that is one of the aims, isn't it, to stop Jeremy Corbyn, because they disagree with him?
I think it is, and I think they were very clear about it. Chuka Umunna has said absolutely in terms that he's concluded he doesn't think Jeremy Corbyn is fit to be Prime Minister. And if you think that, then you can't vote Labour, let alone be a Labour MP. So it's perfectly noble of him to then stand down and say, I'm not going to stay in this party.
But who is this group for?
Well, I mean, it remains to be seen. I mean, let's imagine the group had entirely the Labour Party policies without the anti-Semitism. That would be better. But what it will do over time, and you can't expect this on the first day, is it will start to develop a policy programme. If it transpires it is a party, which it isn't yet. It's a group of independent MPs in Parliament.
It needs to get to there quite quickly, because in politics, it's not just about who you are individually and you might not like somebody. It's not about your own likes or dislikes. It's about who you seek to serve and what good you're going to do for the greater good, not just you.
I mean, electorally, Pfizer, I mean, did you see this as a threat?
You know, I don't know what this group is about, apart from being anti-Corbyn, and that's not something they can run on. That it shows how out of touch they are with people's lives who are struggling with money, they are struggling with paying their energy bills. What are they doing on the policies across the board, on housing, on welfare? You know, this is a group of people who have a very bad record in terms of their policy background, in terms of the way they voted on immigration and the way they voted on welfare. And so, you know, I don't see what is inspirational about this group. And when you look at the policies that Labour put forward in the manifesto in 2017, those were so popular. I had members of my family and friends talk to me. The point is that we went from being so far behind to a point where people could say what the Labour policies were on the doorstep. And, you know, part of that as well was the activists that came in.
Look, you cannot expect a group to have a fully formed manifesto on day one. It's just not realistic.
But what do they stand for?
Well, it's not realistic. Well, it'll be very clear what they stand for in due course. But that's not what the day is about. The day is about they are finally saying that they're not prepared to stand as Labour MPs. If, as Mike Gapes said and Luciana Burgess said, you conclude the Labour Party is institutionally racist and anti-Semitic, if that's your view, you can't stay a member of it.
We had someone come on TV and talk about...
Angela Smith did come in and say funny tinge, which didn't quite help that particular argument. But I get the point. I think Pfizer is correct. There was lots of good stuff in the manifesto that a lot of our activists, liked. However, what Labour also stands for is not just policies, it's not just a think tank, it's our values. And anti-discrimination and fighting racism is a big part of that. We're not a party that says, OK, we'll have good trains, but a bit of anti-Semitism on the side is OK. No, we have to be bigger than that.
I think a lot of people admit that. So you had John McDonnell, you had people coming out that say, look, we've got to do something about anti-Semitism. Of course we do. And, you know, various different things are happening and that will take time, but they need to communicate that well. But can I say what we're not hearing today? It's hundreds of thousands of people like me that joined under Jeremy Corbyn because we finally had a chance to stand for something, stand for real change, no more of this beige politics about personal.
Well, that's fine, because now you will run the Labour Party and the people who don't agree with you will do something else. It's a perfectly reasonable distinction. We just don't agree with you. But unless you've got a plausible way of wrestling back the Labour Party from the institutional anti-Semites at the top, then I cannot see how you stay within it.
But, Phil, the other thing to think about is, and I've spoken to a lot of Labour MPs today and over the weekend who feel incredibly torn right now, because for a lot of their constituents, things like poverty, anti-austerity is a big, big issue for them as well.
Well, will this new grouping stand for that? That's the question, isn't it? Will you look like a bunch of sort of metropolitan elite, nicely suited and booted, you know, Blairite throwbacks?
No, because of course.
Or will you look like a group of people for the masses?
Everybody involved is obviously so conscious that would be a preposterous party to establish. So no, it won't look like that at all. Of course, it'll stand for those sorts of things. It will regard itself as a centre-left party whose primary issues will be precisely those that I showed.
Look how they're starting off. They're not transparent on where they're getting funding from. Are they answering those questions? This isn't new politics, is it?
Well, look, to be fair, it is day one.
Can we just work out where this is going next?
Yeah, but to be fair, you can say where your money's coming from.
Well,
let's just work out where this is going next. Tom Watson tonight put out a quite extraordinary video message you know, saying Labour's really got to change, kind of hinting that he might be, he understands where this is coming from. I mean, do you think there are people like him who are the next lot?
Oh yeah, without doubt. I'm absolutely convinced they are.
Do you know that?
Not that they've decided to go, not that, but that they are contemplating it. They are torn, as Aisha said. They do not know whether they can bring this party back from what they regard as the brink. So yes, they want to stay, the bulk of Labour MPs, of course they do, but they're not certain that it can be rescued.
If a group of 50 were to leave, how below the waterline is that for the Parliamentary Labour Party?
I think my sense right now is that whilst a lot of people will have questions over certain policies or certain positions, the way that anti-Semitism, Brexit, etc., which has happened over time, any big, broad church has those arguments within. They don't want to leave the Labour Party. And the reason they don't want to leave the Labour Party...
The Labour Party's never had an anti-Semitism argument before. That's just never happened. Under any of its previous leaders, that absolutely did not happen.
Look,
it's not normal politics.
Do you know what? I'm not going to argue against the importance of dealing with racism. I'm never going to argue against that. But let's put that in the context of what other parties aren't doing, what the Labour Party is doing, and how much more...
So nothing to do with any other party.
Literally, we have to look at...
to put it in the context of how individual MPs feel. To cross the floor, to leave being a Labour MP, it's not an easy decision, because it's not just you individually, it's you stand on the shoulders of others. There's a lot of tradition, there's a lot of history, and also I've even had a text message from a Conservative today saying, thanks very much guys, you have just gifted us the best thing possible, because this weekend was very difficult for the Tory party, and let's not kid ourselves, this will help reunify the Tory party, and it will help the Tory party.
Phil Collins, you worked for Labour governments for years in 10 Downing Street. How much of an emotional wrench was it for you to leave the Labour Party?
I mean, something of an emotional wrench, because you have an affiliation with it, you have an affiliation with people as well as the institution, so it's always difficult to do that. And there are people who've left the Labour Party today who've been members of it for far longer than I have and feel that tribal affiliation much deeper.
I mean, if Winston Churchill worked for all three main parties at different points in time,
but for a lot of MPs,
what's the big deal?
Particularly, I think I've spoken to a lot of female MPs, Labour MPs, that have worked really hard and fought really hard to get elected, and they're so proud to be Labour MPs because of the tradition of fighting for equality and social justice.
When the party changes so much that that pride is no longer warranted.
Sure, but for some people,
Phil,
I know for you that point has come.
I know, I'm not saying it should come for you now.
Everyone has their own personal point, and you have to respect that.
I do respect it.
This story about Labour changing so much, this is a party that has brought lots of people in, and it has also moved away from the time when it voted through and pushed for things like the Iraq War, when it privatised, when it brought PFIs to our hospitals. So this is a movement which actually moves politics onwards. It gives us an opportunity to really, like I say, really stand for some new policies. And absolutely, we have to do something about various different issues that are within the party. But that's not to say that it doesn't have broad support. It does. I go out door knocking every Saturday. This weekend alone, I had three people tell me they're going to join.
It was interesting talking to Chukraman earlier, where he said he was talking about the things that define him, and he did talk about foreign policy. He said he doesn't like Corbyn's foreign policy, so it makes you think, well, what does he like? And he talked about undeliverable promises like nationalisation. If there are people like you who used to work for Tony Blair and people like Chuka talking like that, why is this not just a Blairite tribute act?
Well, Chuka Umunna wasn't even in Parliament during those days, and quite a lot of the people involved had no sympathy with lots of the Blair years. Also, the other thing about the Blair years is their ancient history. Tony Blair's not been Prime Minister for 12 years. It's irrelevant. The things that were relevant then just aren't pertinent now. So it's preposterous to regard it as that. If it looks like that, it will fail. But it won't be that.
The danger for this, the danger for where the Labour Party is, you've sort of got 1970s politics with the Corbyn lot. You've got potentially 1990s politics with this sort of new group. But the one thing is, the one thing that the Labour Party will not win on is, look, I have sympathy, but if the Labour Party is seen as the nasty party, it will not win.
We've got to stop it there. Thank you all very much indeed. Faiza Shaheen, Phil Collins, Aisha Hazarika. Well, this is the biggest split in British politics since the SDP broke away in the early 80s. How significant will it prove to be? Our political editor, Gary Gibbon, is with me again. What more?
A lot of that might come down to just how the leadership manages to respond to the sort of stuff that you've been talking about that Tom Watson has been saying. You sense with Tom Watson, the Deputy Leader of the Labour Party, that he is trying to, rather in the style of a sort of martial arts, use the strength of this group to somehow change something within the party that he's intending to stay in. But then the great question arises, how long will he and others give that project? How long will they stay doing that? But that's the immediate short-term thing that he's trying to do there. I think you sense some of the tensions that are within this group of 7, even before it potentially expands. When you look into where different MPs, even in that group, have been on different issues, they've been in very different places on issues like tuition fees, defence and things like that. And then when you think if they try and expand that to bring, as they say privately they feel they must, Conservatives in, how on earth do they achieve that? And then we had the issue of timing. There was quite a lot of resistance amongst some people who are in the next circle, as it were, who might just back this project. They really didn't like the fact that it kicked off today. They felt that took attention away from the cause a lot of them believe in, which is a second referendum. Which brings me to one other division, which is an awful lot of the pool in which this group should be fishing, you'd think, for potential support, are people who are actually somewhere else on the Europe debate within the Labour Party. They're actually people with strong Brexit constituencies who actually feel the second referendum is a monstrosity and you shouldn't touch it. So when you think of all those issues, you get a flavour of how this is not a done deal, even in its early, tiny phase.
We've got to leave it there. Thank you very much.
The not-so-private infighting in the Labour Party that's beset the leadership of Jeremy Corbyn over Brexit and over anti-Semitism became very public today. 7 of his MPs who could stand it no longer resigned from the party to form a group of independents. They hope others will follow. The party's deputy leader, Tom Watson, said they will, unless the party changes. Mr Corbyn called their departures disappointing. All 7 explained their reasons. The most piercing came from Luciana Berger. She spoke of the anti-Semitic bullying, bigotry and intimidation that had left her too embarrassed and ashamed to stay. Tonight, the fight over the future of the party continued.
One by one, they made the walk this morning out of the Labour Party. 7 MPs taking their seats as independents. Their resignations, long rumoured, but still an adjustment.
My name is Luciana Berger, and I am the Labour and I am the Member of Parliament for Liverpool Wavertree.
A century of Labour history between them. Each had their reasons to stay not a moment more.
I cannot remain in a party that I have today come to the sickening conclusion is institutionally anti-Semitic.
This has not been an easy decision for any of us. We've all been Labour members of Parliament for very many years, but it has now been hijacked by the machine politics of the hard left.
I'm furious that the Labour leadership is complicit in facilitating Brexit.
So from now on, they'll form the independent group. Not a fully fledged party, but perhaps the makings of one, somewhere in the centre of politics.
7 MPs might be enough for a dinner party, but not necessarily enough for a significant political party. How many others have suggested to you that they might be willing to join you?
Absolutely. We might have a great dinner party with 7. I'm confident, however, that the arguments we're making must impress on our colleagues the choice.
Are we going to see any more resignations?
As much as they try to shield him tonight, the party splinter will prove painful for Jeremy Corbyn, as the leadership insists those who've quit Labour should quit Parliament too.
But all of these MPs stood on our manifesto in 2017, Jeremy Corbyn's manifesto. They all increased their majorities. Now they're on a different platform. So the honourable thing, the usual thing for them to do now is to stand down and fight by-elections.
That is what happened last time there was a split this big.
We have to produce a new political structure for our country.
In the 80s, the SDP might not have won office, but they helped deny it to Labour. Today's resignations could assist the Tories too.
Are you willing, as a group, to vote with the Conservative government on a case-by-case basis?
It completely depends what the issue is. Look, I voted with the Conservatives to take military action in Syria.
But many people in Labour will see that as a huge betrayal. I mean, your critics already call you a red Tory. You're proving them right, aren't you? You would be willing to vote with the Conservative government, make their lives easier.
But it's precisely this old-fashioned tribal politics that looks at the tribe and opposition for opposition's sake as opposed to what is in the national interest that is a big switch off to people.
Once the party's ready, would you like to lead it? Straightforward question.
I want to play the biggest role that I can in any new movement, but given we haven't even formed an organisation yet and I've only literally just today resigned my membership of the Labour Party. I think it would be a bit premature to start setting out, you know, my personal political ambitions, because it's not about me.
Whoever ends up leading the group, it may be about to grow, with several more MPs considering defecting as soon as this week. Today, Labour's deputy leader said the party must change, but tonight, Labour MPs saw little sign of it, leaving their weekly meeting here enraged by the leadership, with one predicting an existential crisis. For now, these MPs will be hoping 7 is a lucky number, but it's too soon to say how they'll change the fortunes of party politics. Paul Brand, News at 10, Westminster.
The 7 MPs made a point of saying that they were from a spread of constituencies across England, from the northwest through Nottingham to in and around London. All 7 MPs voted to remain in the EU. But Gavin Shooker's constituency, Luton South, and Angela Smith's Penistone and Stockbridge voted leave. Ms Smith made no secret today of her opposition to Jeremy Corbyn, a split reflected in her constituency today.
If there's a set of traditional Labour values, it comes from places like Stockbridge. For decades, it's been dominated by the steel industry, and in the town today there was some respect for the mettle shown by the local MP by others who've grown disillusioned with the party.
I think it's a good move. I think Jeremy Corbyn, they hit the nail on the head, is more interested in his promoting his party than doing what's best for Britain.
I think they've done the right thing because somebody's got to stand up to them. And if it's their own MPs that are quitting, what does it say about the rest of us?
Angela Smith has been the MP here since 2010.
Angela Smith, the Labour Party candidate, 17,565.
But many in her local Labour Party have recently turned against her, passing a vote of no confidence in her last November. These Labour activists say they don't recognise the criticisms made of their party today, and told me they feel a mixture of hurt and relief at her departure.
The official line is that we're all sad, but I'm quite ecstatic about it because I'm glad she's gone, because she's just not a Labour person.
I think there have been too many differences for too long, and we'd reached a position where Angela being our MP was untenable.
But while they worry she'll split the Labour vote, they want a by-election here.
Angela Smith was voted for as a Labour MP, and as such that the only honourable thing that they can do really is to stand down.
But for these younger voters, the prospect of a new party is an exciting one. Jay describes himself as a Blairite, a Labour member who at the moment doesn't know who to support.
Another major party is always good for democracy, and I think that we need to, a new centrist party might wake up Labour and the Conservatives to work to unify and to have a bit more of a progressive centrist agenda.
The political landscape here has barely changed for decades, but today has proved there's no certainty for Labour, even in its heartland. Ben Chapman, News at 10, South Yorkshire.
And Robert Peston is with me live in the studio. So, 7 today. How many more?
Very difficult to judge. I thought the second most important political act today was by Tom Watson, the deputy leader of the Labour Party, an extraordinary 5-minute piece to camera in which he was basically saying he was going to become the shop steward of moderate Labour MPs, and actually in my interpretation setting up a sort of shadow cabinet. What he's going to do is he's going to organise those backbenchers to come up with what he calls democratic socialist, social democratic policies of their own on the big challenges of our age, automation, ageing, climate change, because he fears that if backbench MPs continue to feel disempowered over the weeks and months, they may well follow the disillusioned 7 out the door. In his view, and actually, you know, it was very clear from his statement, he believes the very survival of the Labour Party is at stake, and that Jeremy Corbyn and what Tom Watson calls the hard left have to now start listening to the bulk of moderate MPs, or, as I say, Labour's future could be seriously imperilled.
One thing you didn't put on that Tom Watson agenda was Brexit, which Mike Gapes very clearly did at the press conference today. What impact will all of this have on Brexit?
Well, the only reason I didn't mention it is because I knew you were coming on to it. And now, I mean, my view is that actually the departure of the Seven will have an impact on Labour policy. Now, before they jumped, because the so-called People's Vote campaign were desperate to prevent them from jumping, I assumed that their departure would be bad for a referendum. And the People's Vote campaign thought it would be bad for the prospects of Jeremy Corbyn signing up for a referendum because he would see those pushing for this so-called People's Vote as somehow in league with Blair and out to get him. In fact, I think it may actually nudge Corbyn slightly in the direction of a referendum. Why do I say that? Because those who most want to destroy him have now left, and maybe he will start to listen to those within his own party saying the time has come for him to sign up to a referendum on the merits of the argument rather than as a sort of they're the enemy and therefore we've got to kill them kind of basis.
All right, Robert. Thank you.
Labour would probably rather be talking about Honda today. The car company has announced it's to close its plant in Swindon, putting 3,500 jobs at risk. Another stark reminder of the economic headwinds facing the country as we head towards Brexit. Instead, the party's deep divisions over Brexit, anti-Semitism and its leader Jeremy Corbyn erupted into the open today, with 7 MPs resigning the whip. The group, who say they're from different backgrounds, hold the same values, will sit in Parliament as independents. Tonight, though, speculation is rife that a new political party could be on the horizon, with more MPs on both sides of the House said to be considering joining them. Here's our political editor, Nick Watt.
Sad, stoical and pained, with a weary look of resignation, 7 Labour MPs took leave of the party in which they had vested their political dreams.
This morning, we have all now resigned.
This was no moment of celebration, as the 7 said that Jeremy Corbyn had left them with no choice.
I cannot remain in a party that I have today come to the sickening conclusion is institutionally anti-Semitic.
I'm furious that the Labour leadership is complicit in facilitating Brexit.
Any criticism of the leadership is responded to with abuse.
We've taken the first step in leaving the old tribal politics behind, and we invite others who share our political values to do so too.
Today's defections, announced high up in the old county hall, have been months in the making, as the 7 lost patience with Jeremy Corbyn over Brexit and his handling of anti-Semitism. This is the biggest split in the Labour Party since the Gang of Four set up the SDP nearly 40 years ago. Bitter recriminations have echoed down the decades over the wisdom of that breakaway.
The Gang of 7 don't look like the Gang of 4, who electrified British politics when they set up the SDP in 1981. And the reason why they did that was they had huge support in the Labour movement and huge support elsewhere. You have huge support in the Labour movement, but then they all say, not now, stay on board, fight from within. We're trying to do something right for our age, not for the 20th century. Now, I'll try not to take too much offence at the respective judgment of whether or not we match up to the Gang of Four. It's not something that we numerically or otherwise would want to try and line up to. But let me just put this to you. You suggested to me, Nick, that actually in the Labour movement people kind of share our assessment, but they say, not yet, hold back, hold on, one more heave, something will turn up. Something is not going to turn up.
Enough is enough.
The MP who launched the group spoke of the difficult dilemmas she has faced.
This most certainly hasn't been a decision that I've taken lightly. It has taken many months to arrive at the decision, but there have been many things that have happened over the course of the past few years that I've been very outspoken about, that I've sought to challenge, to affect change, and haven't been successful, and that's why I've made the difficult decision today. And for many of us who have roots that go into the Labour Party and through generations, that never in a million years did I anticipate having joined the party as an enthusiastic student, put myself forward for election, with the values that I believed chimed with the Labour Party and which are part and parcel of the Labour Party, to have to make the decision that I've made today.
The leadership was dismissive.
I'm disappointed, but all of these MPs stood on our manifesto in 2017, Jeremy Corbyn's manifesto. They all increased their majorities. Now they're on a different platform. So the honourable thing, the usual thing for them to do now is to stand down and fight by-elections back in their constituencies.
But the party's deputy leader said he feared this moment would come. Tom Watson said, unless we change, we may see more days like this. Labour's most senior Scottish MP warned he could leave if Jeremy Corbyn fails to uphold party policy for a second referendum in certain circumstances.
And I think we'll all be wrestling with our own consciences of why we've joined political parties and whether or not the party still represents what we believe in, and we'll all be thinking about that over the coming days and weeks given the catalyst that we've been given today. So the answer to your question is no, I'm not planning on leaving the Labour Party, but also the answer to that question is that the Labour leadership have to respond positively, otherwise I may indeed, and many others, may change their mind.
Relief for the close-knit group after they finally went public. They hope today will mark the beginning of a journey that will reshape the political landscape and will not be remembered as a blip that will end up consuming their careers.
And Nick Watt is here. Nick, all these words of warning for Labour, where does it leave them though?
Well, you heard of Tom Watson there talking about how there could be more defections, and there are Labour MPs saying that that process could be accelerated after what was described to me as a truly dreadful meeting of the Parliamentary Labour Party tonight. One former minister described it to me as a total car crash. Now, you had a lot of Labour MPs there tonight, very sympathetic with these seven, and Ian Lavery, the chairman of the Labour Party, he turned up and basically delivered the leadership lines, which was that this was a terrible mistake, and he took great exception to the description of Labour as institutionally anti-Semitic. Now, at one level, you could say it's no surprise that the leadership's going to put up its position after a big moment like this. Of course they want to put their position across, but there are Labour MPs who are saying that perhaps this was the time for sort of balm on the wounds. But I'm told by senior sources in the Labour Party that the key person to watch is Tom Watson, the Deputy Leader, because in that statement you saw, he said that the decision made by the seven was premature. He didn't say it was wrong, he said it was premature. And as I understand it, Tom Watson and a lot of Labour MPs are having very, very serious thoughts about where their future lies.
But it's not just Labour that's divided.
That's right. There were 4 cabinet ministers today who went in to see Theresa May and said, Prime Minister, it's time for you to take no deal off the table. That was David Cork, Amber Rudd, Greg Clark and David Mundell, who is the Scottish Secretary. Now, I'm told that it wasn't sort of ultimatum territory, but they were essentially saying, look, no deal served a purpose. Warning of no deal served a purpose as a negotiating tactic, but we're beyond that, and it is now dangerous with all these warnings from business, so be careful. And it's interesting, there are a number of Conservative MPs who are looking very carefully at this new grouping. I spoke to one who told me that within the next week they think they may well leave the Conservative Party if Theresa May doesn't take no deal off the party, and joining this group as a possibility. Another former cabinet minister said to me, this group could fade or they could be the government within a year.
Nick, thank you. Well, in a moment we'll discuss with a panel of MPs what impact, if any, this will have on Jeremy Corbyn's leadership of the party. Today, the Deputy Leader, as Nick said, very pointedly said the party's front bench needs to once again reflect the balance of opinion in the Parliamentary Labour Party. Earlier this evening, I spoke to Labour's Shadow Education Secretary, Angela Rayner, and asked her to respond to Luciana Berger's view of the party that she had come to the sickening conclusion that it is anti-Semitic.
Well, I'm really deeply upset by the abuse that Luciana has faced. I've seen some of that abuse that she's had to witness online, and I think it's disgusting. But I don't think the Labour Party is institutionally anti-Semitic or racist, and if it was, I wouldn't be in the party. I think we fought that, that's our core values, it goes to what the Labour Party stands for, so I don't think that's the case. But Luciana has faced abuse.
Yes, and she is Jewish and you're not, and she feels that.
Well, and exactly, and you know, I've faced abuse online and offline as well. But what I'm saying is that I do not believe, you asked me the question, is the Labour Party institutionally anti-Semitic? I don't believe that's the case, no.
Given what she's gone through in the last more than a year, 2 years, and so given that it's been abuse online, given we all know about it, Don't you find it extraordinary that she said today that Jeremy Corbyn has not spoken to her since 2017? That is at least 14 months.
Well, you know, I saw Luciana at the Parliamentary Labour Party only the other week where, you know, she was expressing how upset she's felt. And I know that the Labour Party leadership, including myself, who's been to Luciana's constituency, have really reached out to try and help. Anyone that abuses Luciana is disgusting and shouldn't have any place in the Labour Party. But I've got to say that the vast majority of Labour Party members are fully supportive and would not accept that level of abuse to any Labour member or politician.
Your leader, Jeremy Corbyn, did not see fit to see her within the last 14 months, especially as what she's been going through most recently. Now, if that was a boss in a company whose employee came and said that they were being treated with racist abuse, you know, you would say that's dreadful that boss hasn't spoken to them. Your leader, Jeremy Corbyn, should have seen Luciana Berger, shouldn't he?
Well, Jeremy's reached out to Luciana Berger. I've witnessed that over this period. I've seen his comments that he's made, and he's condemned that. She said today he hasn't spoken to her. I can't speak about what Luciana's expressions and what conversation she may have had with Jeremy. Now, all I can say is that I've witnessed Jeremy reach out to Luciana and others. I've witnessed him talk about the condemnation of that abuse. If I felt that Jeremy Corbyn accepted that abuse in our party, I wouldn't be in it. I wouldn't be in his shadow cabinet. I don't believe that's the case. Jeremy Corbyn has fought anti-Semitism, he's fought racism all his life, and he's proud of that record, and we will continue as a party to fight against that.
Tom Watson said today, I fear now that unless we change, we may see more days like this. What needs to change?
Well, I think we have to look at making sure that we stay united as a Labour Party, because every time we fight each other, it takes us further away from government, and this country needs a change of direction. It needs a Labour government that's going to rebuild our economy, that's going to invest in areas like the North West, like Luciana's constituency, like mine in Manchester. We need to make sure that we stay united and look after each other.
But when Tom Watson says things have to change, he says the front bench needs to once again reflect the balance of opinion in the Parliamentary Labour Party. Do you accept that it simply does not reflect the opinion and it needs to be reshuffled?
I think the shadow cabinet is the most diverse you've ever had. People with my voice, my background, and people from all sides of the Labour Party and all parts of the Labour Party are in that shadow cabinet. I do not accept that it's not representative.
So Tom Watson is wrong.
I do not accept that our shadow cabinet is not representative of the Labour Party.
So no change. I mean, what Tom Watson seems to be saying is there needs to be fundamental change. People need to feel the Labour Party is once again a broad church. People that support business, you know, people that are pro-Brexit, all these people need to be welcomed into the party. People that support NATO, for example, and that is not the position of the shadow cabinet.
Well, if you looked at the position of the shadow cabinet, which was our 2017 general election manifesto, it was a broad-based manifesto. It had a huge amount of support, and actually there wasn't a single Labour MP that disagreed with our manifesto. I think we do have a plan for Britain, and we can deliver that if we stay united, whereas if we end up splitting and not looking after the people that need our support more than ever now, when you've got universal credit, homelessness, you've got all these problems that our country face, we need a Labour government, and we need it urgently, and we won't get that if we're fighting each other.
But there's 7 people, they say they're from different backgrounds, but they hold the same values. Do you get the impression that the leadership is willing to listen to those who disagree with it? For example, on Brexit.
Well, the Labour Party has always, you know, dealt with different opinions in it. You know, I've never agreed with every single thing that a Labour leader has ever said.
So what do you disagree with Jeremy Corbyn on?
Well, I think there's been things that Jeremy Corbyn said that I thought, well, you know, I'm trying to think of one at this moment in time. Probably Trident, for example. There were some things I would have spent the money on defence, maybe, and he hasn't said that, so I would go a bit further. You know, Tony Blair did a lot on education, but I didn't agree with him on PFI, for example. So you don't agree with everything that everyone ever says in the Labour Party, but we do have a manifesto that we all stand on, and we have a collective vision for our country, and that's what's important going forward.
Angela Rayner. Well, I'm joined now by Chris Leslie, one of the MPs who resigned today, and by 2 Labour MPs, Siobhan McDonagh and Lloyd Russell-Mogg. Good evening to all of you. Hi. First of all, Siobhan, would you like this to be a wake-up call for the leadership?
Absolutely. Jeremy Corbyn controls the Labour Party in a way that no previous Labour leader ever has, and it's really up to him. Does he want this to be a small rump party that never gets into government again, or does he want it to be a broad-based left-of-centre party? The decision rests with him.
But there is trouble, and we heard from Nick Watt that I think he called the words about the PLP meeting tonight was it was a bit of a car crash. What happened?
It was Ian Lavery, the chair of the party, came and basically told us why it's important to be Labour, why we need a Labour government. This was a room full of Labour MPs. But
Would you like to see Jeremy Corbyn turn up?
Oh, I'm not sure where he was. I think he may have been at a funeral, so I'm not criticising that. But actually, I've had to apologise to Lloyd just now because I told him to shut up at the meeting, because I got so furious that Ian Lavery stood up and said, if this was an anti-Semitic party, I wouldn't be in it.
But you heard Angela Rayner bat away the idea that Jeremy Corbyn, in the words, should have reached out to Luciana Berger in the last 14 months. She said on Radio 5 Live today that she had not spoken to Jeremy Corbyn for 14 months.
Well, I mean, I've no reason to disagree or think that Luciana isn't telling the truth. I was at the Parliamentary Labour Party last week. I saw a young woman, 8.5 months pregnant, stand up and read out some of the stuff that she has been receiving. There was no representative from the leadership there, nobody to hold out a hand, nobody to say this is vile and it will not go on. Jeremy can do that. It's up to him whether he does or not.
Any indication, you heard what Tom Watson said, that the front bench has got to take this seriously and has got to change. Any indication that there's going to be a reshuffle, that anyone like Jeremy Corbyn is actually listening to this?
Absolutely no indication. So, tonight we learnt that Derek Hatton, yes,
Derek
Hatton, militant Derek Hatton, has just been allowed membership back of the Labour Party.
What does that say to you?
It says that nobody's listening.
Chris Leslie, what would be the case that you would make to Siobhan McDonagh to make her join your grouping?
Well, I have massive respect for Siobhan. I don't need to make a case to Siobhan. She's perfectly capable of coming to her own conclusions. I actually share, I think, pretty much totally the values that Siobhan has espoused, and she is an excellent constituency member of Parliament. We've all got to come to terms with what is a really, really difficult situation, because for us, it's the Labour Party that we joined, I joined 32 years ago, is no longer the Labour Party of today.
Well, you heard Nick Watts saying as well, you know, Tom Watson's, you know, very critical, thinking about his position. Are you thinking about your position? Would you become an MP that's not a Labour MP?
This is really hard. I mean, you know, you heard today how long all the 7 MPs have been in the Labour Party.
How long have you been in?
On Wednesday, Kirsty, I'm going to be 59, and I will have been in the party 43 years.
So it's a big decision.
It's a huge decision. I go out canvassing every Sunday morning. I do my surgery every Friday. I love my constituents. I love my constituency party. You know, there's this impression that MPs or people involved in political parties don't really care. It's all about their career. But it's about our life, our emotions and our values. None of these are easy decisions to make.
But you haven't made up your mind?
Well, at the moment, I haven't completely lost faith in the Labour Party. I do believe it has produced the things that I'm most proud of in my country, the NHS, the welfare benefit system. But you know, ultimately, we all have to make decisions.
Chris, just very briefly on today. Day one, you launched an anti-racism platform, and Angela Smith, one of your number, said something that was perceived by racists in as much as she felt she had to apologise for it.
Oh, yeah, I mean, she made a slip, and she has apologised for that. But, I mean, at the end of the day, the issues that we were talking about were not just about anti-Semitism, were about Brexit, were about national security, were about a whole series of issues, but they all root back to a fundamental issue, which is that the Labour Party's become obsessed by quite a narrow, outdated ideology.
I want to bring Lloyd in, but just one final point on this. You've all said that you're not going to stand down and force by-elections. You've formed yourselves into a limited company. That means we don't know who's funding you, who's actually backing you, and how much they're backing. Who is backing you?
No, I can tell you. We started today. I paid with my colleagues.
No one outside is backing you.
Let me explain. We hired a room today.
Yeah.
We set up a website.
Right.
But the website, www.theindependent.group, has crowdfunding on it. We've had a phenomenal response from the public.
So it's all crowdfunding.
But we need that infrastructure if we're going to build an alternative for the public to choose.
Tom Watson said that unless the party changes, unless the leadership changes its approach, there are going to be more days like this. Is he right?
I would hope that he's not right, that there will be more days like this.
He is the deputy leader of the party.
Well, I would hope that he's not right, that there will be more days like this. I hope that we will reach out and speak to colleagues, and that's what I said at the Parliamentary Labour Party. I said, if there are colleagues thinking seriously about wanting to leave, let's talk, let's communicate.
But it didn't happen tonight, did it?
No, it didn't happen tonight. But
so this was the night it should have happened, surely.
No, it is a process that we need to do now in the next few days. And on issues like Brexit, which I feel just as passionately as I think all three of us kind of agree on this point, my feeling is them the group walking out into the wilderness or walking out into another party will actually weaken Remainers' voices in the Labour Party. It will make it harder for us to get to the right position. And that is the real problem. And that's why I feel rather frustrated by not only the timing, but the way that this is done.
Let's just very briefly say, on the Luciana Berger question, she feels very strongly that there's institutional anti-Semitism in the party. I mean, are you just going to dismiss that? Does it matter?
We need to split some of those areas off. A lot of people who left today out of the 7 mentioned Brexit, and that's one thing. Luciana has been treated absolutely appallingly. Her CLP doing absolutely stupid things like trying to put motions of no confidence. And what I can tell you, I know, is that the Leader's Office did directly speak to people in her CLP to get those stupid things removed and get that stopped. And
in the first place.
Well, things will always happen.
Things will always happen. In terms of anti-Semitism, just saying things will always happen.
I was a member of the Labour Party under Tony Blair and under Gordon Brown, and there were CLPs suspended then, and things. Sexist things happened then, racist things happened, and you interacted and you stopped it and you suspended the Labour Party, and that is what needs to happen now.
Is there a chance that you will not be in the party in a month's time?
I hope not.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed.